Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Raquel V Reyes.
Hi there. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to chat with you. Can you tell me a little bit about your book?
Sure. Mango, Mambo, and Murder is a Caribbean kitchen. It's the first in the series, mystery. And it's what we call the culinary cozy because we've got some recipes in the back. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of food mentioned, a lot of food. And actually, my main character, Miriam Quinones, is a food anthropologist. And a food anthropologist is the intersection between culture, history, and the reason why we eat certain things. And anyway, that's the whole thing. We're going to talk about that later.
And that's really interesting. I would love to talk more about that, definitely.
As far as the story goes, Miriam Quinones and her family, she's got a young family, moved back to Miami. And they don't move to Hialeah, which is the area she grew up in, which is very kind of, working class and Spanish speaking. They moved to her husband's hometown within the city of Miami. And it is very different. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of fun with that. And then, of course, there's murders and other things and all kinds of, tension and fun and a mother-in-law that you can love to hate and, a best friend, a BFF, who pitches in and helps out and gets into a little trouble herself that Miriam then has to, get out. So, yeah, there's a lot going on, but it definitely falls within the cozy mystery, feel good story.
Yes. And those are just so much fun. I love reading those and I highly recommend this one. So can you tell me a bit about how you decided to make it into a culinary cozy specifically?
Well, sure. I mean, I love good food by all means, but I'm definitely not a recipe kind of person. I don't have a whole library of cookbooks or anything like that. And, I'm definitely fall more into the home cook. And so when I was developing this character, I was like, I just didn't feel like I had the expertise to write a chef. You know what I'm saying? But I do really, really enjoy doing research on the Caribbean and on Caribbean foods. I myself am Cuban American. I lived in Puerto Rico for a while. I've traveled throughout the Caribbean to different islands and so forth. And I live in Miami, which is the gateway to the Caribbean and Latin America. Mm-hmm. So I chose to make her a food anthropologist so I could explore all of the things that I love, because hopefully it's going to be a long series and I certainly didn't want to get bored, right? Mm-hmm. And so I get to talk all about the different mix of what makes the Caribbean so special. And that's the reason why I chose to do it as a food anthropologist. Now, she gets a job as a cooking show host on a Spanish language morning show. She fills in for somebody, and that becomes a regular gig, mm-hmm. which is great because what she's doing is a little along the lines of like Anthony Bourdain. And if you've seen the High on the Hog documentary, she's talking about the reasons why we eat these foods and where these foods come from. And so while she's cooking and telling you how to make something, she's also giving you a little history lesson. And that's the thing that really excites me. And so
that was something really fun as a reader too, because I would always be so excited when you would talk about like her going to work at the station and filming this stuff. And as she was doing it, you would sprinkle in these fun facts. And I love that because it wasn't just you saying, oh, she said some like nuggets of like knowledge about this, but you would actually tell the reader what she was explaining.
Yeah. I hope that that excites some people. And I hope that it also excites people to try these foods. Mm-hmm. I know that not everyone has access like I do here in Miami to a wonderful Caribbean grocery store, but, hey, come for a visit. And when you go for a visit, be adventurous, try the foods, right?
Totally. Yeah. That was one of the things that was like, I freaked out when I first saw that there were all the recipes in the back of the book. So I had already started reading. I was like 20% through or something. And just at reading it the entire time, I was going, oh my gosh, I want to eat all of this. I want to make all of this. I'm a food blogger and I've always loved food.
Awesome.
So this book was so much fun to read because I was like, oh, I can try these things and make that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Kind of pivoting, I want to talk a little bit about where they moved, Coral Shores. And the town in it is very much like pretty much a character because you like know like how a lot of the people act. There's like this vibe that changes depending on where they are in the town and the different like areas and stuff. Can you tell me a bit about how you created that?
Sure. So Miami-Dade County is huge. I have to look up the fact because I keep saying this and I don't want to, be telling lies, but I think that we're like the largest county in all of the United States or one of the top, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this really big county. And so within the county, there are all these different municipalities, right? And so I took about, there's 2 or 3 that are kind of meet this criteria. And I just kind of mashed them up together and kind of made, my own little Coral Shores. So it's not, it's not fantasy, I guess is what I want to say. Like they're very much, the little parts of the town actually are from other little municipalities here. Like it's really, it could happen, I guess is what I want to say. It could happen. And Miami has, like so many places nowadays, has this large disparity between like this ultra rich and then this kind of like, working lower middle class kind of thing, like there's not like much of an in between. So I really wanted to make sure that Miriam's roots as from a working class neighborhood were represented because she is married to this guy who, has this trust fund that she's all of a sudden like, where are you getting all this money from? Like, because they had lived in New York for the first part of their marriage and she didn't really have interaction with his family, and so she's like learning a lot of new things. And some of them are like, wow. And also she didn't really sign up for moving 3 blocks away from her mother-in-law.
And she didn't necessarily sign up for her mother-in-law having a key to the house and everything.
Yeah, exactly. When they were so far away in New York, there wasn't much interaction. And that was kind of like honeymoon time. And so coming in, there's a little bit of adjustment. I mean, I think they say, what is it? Like moving, death, marriage, divorce. Like it's one of like the hardest things, So we open up the book and she's just made this move. And so it's a little stressful for her, but she gets into the flow and she gets on her own feet as we finish out the story, I think. So.
Something that really does help her get on her feet that I think was a great introduction into this new character that I hope will keep popping up in the series was Sally, her sister-in-law. And that was really interesting to hear about like the things that she would do to get away from the mother-in-law and like having this perspective also as like an outsider into this family.
Yeah, I love Sally. She was a nice, fun character because I didn't want to villainize his entire family because it's really not. It's just the one person.
Yeah.
it's just that one person. Yeah, she's really fun. And, she just had the opportunity to tackle the problem in a different way than Miriam did. Miriam's coming in, Sally's blonde. She's not blonde and blue-eyed, but you know what I'm saying? Like, she's close enough to the mother-in-law's own culture that, she can get away with a little bit more, but Miriam isn't. I mean, Miriam's Cuban American. Miriam's working class. She didn't go to the country club and all this other stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of fun to have with that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, the family dynamic was really interesting in this one. And like talking about what you were saying, like how she doesn't fit into that mold that the mother-in-law had, like, because it's like her favorite son. Like that was I'm trying to think of how to word this, but it was really fun to read and like kind of get into like trying to figure out like some of the psychology behind what she was doing.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard, thankfully, from some readers that they really feel it's realistic, and they're like, oh yeah, I've been in that situation, or so forth and so on. So because I didn't again want to make her so outrageous that she wasn't believable. I think she is. I think we all have run into a character like her at some point. Mm-hmm. I'll just say that.
Yes. Kind of talking more about like what you were saying, where you're trying to keep it realistic. Can you tell me about how your life as a Cuban American also influenced the story in any way, or at least the characterization of Miriam?
Sure. I've been writing for a while, and I love mystery. I love crime fiction. I love cozies. I love that whole genre. And I didn't really see anyone reflected back to me that was like me. Mm-hmm. There are some stories set in Miami. There are a few Cuban American writers. They don't really write cozies. They more write on the PI side. But I didn't see anyone in cozy or amateur sleuth that was Cuban American. And so I think it's really important that we have inclusion. Mm-hmm. And so it was very important for me to write her as a Cuban American. And then just on the fun of it, I love Miami. Mm-hmm. Miami it's taken me a long time to love Miami. Miami can be a hard place to love living here, just living here. There's like some, obstacles of just everyday grind that you're just like, ugh. But mm-hmm. There's so much about Miami that I love, and I really wanted to put that in a book and really highlight, all the good things about Miami. We have water, we have cruise boats, we have all kinds of wonderful cuisine, we have languages flying at you all the time. Like I remember mm-hmm. I can walk down the street and sometimes I hear 5 different languages, and I love that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in like the suburbs of Chicago, so I don't really have that, but that sounds like something that would just be so amazing. And while reading this, you could really feel like I could feel the love that you had for Miami. Mm-hmm. And I could also kind of tell that you lived there, because you would say certain things like how you mentioned that it only has 2 seasons, hurricane and tourist. Yeah. And like how you would say stuff. So like it was really fun to hear about like your relationship to this place through a fictional character.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
So what interested you in writing a cozy mystery? I know you said that you wanted to bring more diversity into the genre, but like what interested you about the genre?
I love cozies. I mean, I don't like horror films. I don't like gore. Like occasionally I can watch some of that stuff. It's funny. I do like Icelandic noir, which can be really, really dark, but I can watch it, but I can't read it. There's something about reading that is different for me. That's I don't want to read terrible things. Oddly, I can kind of see terrible things on video, because I think maybe I can turn away, or I can recognize that it's not real. You know what I'm saying? Mm. But as far as reading pleasure, I love a good puzzle. I love setting. I love colorful characters, and when you're reading a cozy, it's going to turn out to be okay, Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you're reading other stuff, you don't necessarily know that.
Yeah.
But when you pick up a cozy, certain things. And so, yeah, because I loved cozies and amateur sleuths, I wanted to, write one.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's interesting what you were saying about how you can like not read terrible things like that, because I'm the exact opposite. Oh. Like when I try to watch horror movies and stuff, I can get through it, mm-hmm. but barely. But then but reading it, I have no problem. And I think it's just interesting that everyone sort of has like different tolerances and like different disconnects with reading and watching.
That's the reason why I think that's like there's room for all of us at the table, because there is a writer for every reader and a reader for every writer. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And so if we just make room for all of kind of these different little facets, I think it just makes it better in general.
It's like that quote. I don't know who said it, but where it says like remember that you're someone's favorite author.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like what you were saying, there's a reader for every author and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier that you aren't really a recipe type person. How did you go about creating the recipes for this book?
Yeah, so writing the recipes is one of the harder parts because, I'm a home cook and I learned at beside someone, and there was no measuring. I mean, like there were cookbooks always around, but I never saw somebody pick up a cookbook and take it into the kitchen. Like we read cookbooks just as like, oh, this might be something fun to try, but that recipe never came into the kitchen. So having to, measure out things, that was like, that took a couple of tries of like, oh, I normally, just kind of put a pinch of this, a dash of this, like you just know, and you taste it and you know what else to put. But to have to kind of whittle it down to, oh, this is a half of a teaspoon and this is a tablespoon. And, all the little different steps that come into cooking that I think maybe when you grow up cooking, you just kind of instinctually know. So that was like a new skill that I had to work on.
Yeah, I definitely understand you on that. My mom always says she cooks like a mad scientist. I'm like, wait, you're the one teaching me though. So was that like one of the harder parts of the book in general, or was there something else as you were writing that like was like a big challenge?
Yeah, sure. I mean, writing a book is a lot of words. There's a lot of words in there. And you hope that you're getting it right. And you hope that you're making it interesting. And you hope that all these kind of little fun clues and little side stories that you had and little, kind of not really Easter eggs, but maybe Easter eggs that are in there. You hope that by the end of that arc that you've tied it all together. And I think, that's just like in general, that's the hard part of writing is making sure you've picked up on all of those little things and brought them to a satisfying end. And now that satisfying end doesn't have to be neat and pretty, especially in a series, because, sometimes in a series, book 2 is going to pick up some of those other things. But you also just have to make sure that, let's say, like for you like the character of Sally, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want Sally to have only had one scene, so kind of like making sure all of this cast of characters that you've built has their own satisfying character arc.
Yes.
Am I making sense on that?
No,
yeah.
No, absolutely. And that's something that really shines through in the book, because there were characters like, not spoiling anything, but Sunny Weatherman's mom, whose name I currently cannot remember.
Stormy.
Thank you. But Stormy, I was only anticipating her to show up for that one scene in the beginning and maybe another scene later. But she was a character that kept popping up in new and more interesting ways. And I was like, oh, I was very pleasantly surprised by that. I felt like everybody really paid their dues.
Oh, nice. Good. Yeah. Thank you. That's what I intended. So,
so you have done a lot of different types of writing. Just looking you up, I've seen you've done poetry and cozy mysteries and like different types of mysteries and all these different things. Out of all of that, do you have a favorite?
It depends what day it is what is my favorite. I don't really write much poetry any longer because it's just it's a very different, for me at least, writing poetry is a lot. You have to have a lot of contemplation time before you get those lovely 6 to 12 lines on a page. Mm-hmm. And poetry is actually hard. I wish people would appreciate that it's actually hard. I love short stories. I love to write short stories when in the middle of writing my long novel, because it's so good to take a little mental break and then write a short story. And short stories are so satisfying. I love to read them and I enjoy writing them. They're usually around 3,000 to 5,000 words. They're just this nice little, beginning, middle, and end. And there's just a lot of satisfaction in them. Mm-hmm. So, I love writing novels because I love that these characters get to be in a series and keep going on, and you can develop all this stuff about them. And like I'm already thinking, what's happening in book 3. Ooh, and she's going to get to do this. Oh, that'll be fun. Right. That doesn't necessarily happen with short stories, but also short stories are compact and you can really, it's like very much the opposite. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to worry too much about their backstory and about their future story and everything. You just have to worry about the action of that immediate story.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in a novel, I would be disappointed if I didn't know anything about the characters. Right. But in a short story, depending on like the writing style and everything, I would find it completely normal and interesting if I didn't know a single fact about the characters.
Right. Yeah.
What genre do you usually write short stories in?
My short stories are usually a little harder than my cozies, but in that there might be cussing, there might be a little bit more reference to sexuality or, things like that. But I always have humor. I mean, I think that's the thing that's similar between my short stories and my cozy mysteries is that I do like to put in a little bit of humor and I like to have that fun with things. But yeah, my short stories, there might actually be a stabbing on the page, which in a cozy, you wouldn't really do. You wouldn't really talk about that too much, but yeah.
Or if there was a death on page, once again, try not to give away anything. It's usually like a poisoning or something, at least from what I've read, that is
not a lot of gun violence.
Not really bloody or gory or anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's not gunplay usually in cozies. Or, you might hear something out in the distance, oh, did I hear, a gunfire? But it would never, you wouldn't really.
And then you don't see, I know you're not seeing anything because it's a book, but you don't like see the body usually, right. Like something like that. Yeah. So when you write, do you outline usually?
I do a skeleton outline. I use a software called Plotter. I like it because it's really clear and simple, and linear. I tend to be a linear type of person. So I write. I know my beginning. I know some of the scenes in the middle, and I kind of know the end. And I just kind of write between those little stops that I have. Mm-hmm. I know at this point, this is going to happen. I know at this point, this action is going to happen. And I know at this point, this action is going to happen. And then all of those details in between, I just kind of fill in as I go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of different authors, a lot of different mystery authors too. And everyone has a different method. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting to see like which books, like what they do for which one.
Yeah, I know some thriller and suspense writers love their Post-it notes and they're color coded, and that map that you see with all the lines drawn together. Yes. That it's kind of that, but with Post-it notes. Mm-hmm. Like it's this whole wall of their writing room with all of these. I can't do that.
It's the Post-it note wall. I've heard about those.
Yeah.
I've also met thriller authors that say that they do, unlike suspense writers that say they do not outline at all because they like to discover as their character does.
They're pantsers by the seat of their pants. Yeah.
Yep. It's just really interesting to see how everything works differently for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that was actually all the questions I had for you today, but Thank you so much for coming on. This was so great to talk with you.
I really enjoyed it. And this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
I just have one last question, and that is, what do you have coming up?
Oh, coming up. Let's see. Short stories. So Mango, Mambo, and Murder is out. I have a short story in Trouble No More, which is a crime fiction anthology themed around Allman Brothers songs. So all of the titles of the songs are taken from Allman Brothers songs. That was a really fun one to write. And then I have Midnight Hour, an anthology from 20 crime writers of color, which is coming out in November. And so we're really excited about that. We'll be doing some promo and some readings and so forth like that. So, follow me on social media. And I always try to post all of the stuff that we're doing. And so, catch us on a reading and experience some of what's coming up.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone listening to this, go check out Mango, Mambo, and Murder and any of her other projects. Also great. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Raquel V. Reyes.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after, the end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Read Between the Lines Podcast and on Twitter at RBTL Podcast. Make sure to follow the authors who I've been talking to hear all about their upcoming projects, and also because they're cool people. This show is hosted by me, Molly Southgate, and produced and edited by my dad, Rob Southgate. Read Between the Lines is a Southgate Media Group production, and you can find all the great content put on by the network at southgatemediagroup.com. You can read the story of how I and many other podcasters started in the anthology book Pod Life, which you'll find at the link in the show notes. Also in the show notes are links to buy the books featured on this episode. Using those links supports this show and the incredible authors being interviewed. Have a great week and keep reading.